Ready?
Yep, ready to go. Hi everybody, welcome to our latest webinar in our series of webinars celebrating LGBTQ+ History Month in the Northwest. Today I'm really pleased to welcome Carmony, Lee and Jess, who will be talking to us broadly around staff networks, their benefit in the system. As usual, any questions into the chat please, and we'll pick them up at the end. And could you, when we start showing the webinar, could people just drop me a message just to confirm everybody can see and hear okay? Brilliant. Over to Jess, Carmony and Lee. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I missed something then. Is it?
You can start speaking, Carmony.
Okay, hello, my name is Carmony McCann, Head of Inclusion and Engagement at University Hospitals of Morecambe Bay, and my pronouns are she or her.
Hi, my name's Lee. Jenkinson, and I'm the LGBT plus staff and patient network lead, and my pronouns are he and him.
Hi everybody, my name's Jessica and I am an assistant project manager at Lancashire and South Cumbria Integrated Care System, and my pronouns are she and her.
So today we're going to have a conversation about our approach to inclusion at University Hospitals of Morecambe Bay, with a particular focus on LGBT inclusion. We're going to talk about the importance of networks, our own Trust's LGBT plus network, and how we work across Lancashire and South Cumbria as an ICS.
Okay, so I'll make a start by asking Carmony a couple of questions. And the first one, Carmony, UHMBT were named #1 in top 50 most inclusive employers list in 2020. So what approach have you taken to reach that achievement, to make that goal?
Yeah, thanks Jessica. So our aim as an organisation is simple: to be a great place to be cared for, a great place to work for every individual. And we believe and articulate and act upon the belief that it is important that we get that right for every individual. Our approach to inclusion centres on passion, commitment and action from colleagues across the whole organisation. And following a board commissioned review into our equality practice in early 2004, at the end of 2014, I think, which showed that we were just about meeting the minimum requirements, we set upon our journey towards inclusion with a new leadership structure and approach. And we focused on inclusive and compassionate leadership. So our Towards Inclusion strategy is owned by the board, whose understanding, support and willingness to understand the current realities of experience for different groups to then drive change has become at the heart of how they operate. But it's not just about the board, so the focus of our approach has absolutely been about developing leadership for inclusion and active allyship at all levels. And we've really learned from Michael West, who spoke at one of our leadership conferences many years ago, around 3 important principles of compassionate leadership. So we listen, so really listen, not just superficially, to our colleagues and communities to understand their experiences of us. We invest time in learning from others and best practice, and have been very fortunate to be part of the NHS Employers Equality Partners programme, which has given us an amazing opportunity to work with different colleagues leading this agenda across the NHS, but also learn from other organisations and giving us real insights into best practice and building confidence in us as a team. We show compassion and understanding, so like we talk about difference. We're really open and transparent about sharing the data relating to differences in experience for different groups, and we seek out and actively involve people who've had really poor experiences in helping us to understand what we can do differently, better and improve. And then we we also believe that we're now acting with intelligence to make improvements. So our inclusion networks, led by some truly amazing people, are really drive improvements in both colleague and patient experience, as well as providing peer support to their members. And learning from the National NHS Workforce Race Equality Standard approach and the impact that has had on terms of our race equality journey and the relationships that we now have with our BAME colleagues, we've taken similar approaches by developing other local workforce standards. So one of those is for sexual orientation, and that started with bespoke survey that we developed with Lancashire LGBT, a local organisation, to understand current experiences, and then that has developed to now incorporate wider people and OD metrics and staff survey indicators that we break down by different sexualities, with stark differences between groups. I think skills development is also integral to our approach. So as well as our kind of baseline behavioural standards framework and equality and diversity training, in partnership with CTAD at Lancaster University, we developed our own inclusive behaviours workshop and programme, which we've delivered to about 1,800 staff so far. And we've commissioned a national expert, Eden Charles, who's delivering our inclusive leadership programme. And alongside that, we have bespoke programmes. So our LGBT network, in partnership with Renaissance, another local organisation, developed and deliver LGBT awareness training to colleagues across our organisation, which we've linked to the National Rainbow Badge scheme. And LGBT plus inclusion has been a real thread through our annual inclusion conferences, with high profile speakers from the LGBT community. And I think finally we have a real team UHMB approach, with people across the whole organisation getting involved, speaking out and becoming like real champions for inclusion, developing our organisation but also themselves. And it genuinely feels like we're part of a wider movement of a change, kind of within our organisation, within the NHS and wider. And empowerment and fun are visible in our approach, alongside how we work in partnership to tackle really tricky issues that we do still face.
Wow, brilliant. So where do we go from here? Where are UHMBT? What's ahead? What does that journey look like?
So I think it's inevitable that COVID and our kind of response and recovery to that is going to be the focus of a lot of our activity over the coming 1-2 years, even longer. And that will include supporting our colleagues with issues of burnout, fatigue, psychological well-being, and as is our usual practice, we'll really pay attention to understanding what is facing different groups, and our LGBT colleagues and communities are one group that is really important to us. And our network, as Lee I'm sure will describe, have just undertaken a reach out to colleagues and people across the Bay to seek feedback about what people would like to see from the network, and also from LGBT equality as in terms of focus in the coming months and years. So we know we have so much more to do, which we'll understand that through engagement with our people in our organisation and our communities, and we will apply positive difference and rebel ideas to tackling that in the way that we have done in the last 5 years. So I think in addition to that, I've kind of talked about our inclusion networks, and they're really at the heart of how we support colleagues and transform experience. And I remember well starting to work in early 2015 with LGBT colleagues and Lancashire LGBT to understand current experience and learn from best practice organisations. And we had a really small group of staff who were really keen to make a big difference for others, some of whom had really poor experiences of our organisation. And from that work with that group, our LGBT network emerged. And Lee, as the chair of that network, could you tell us about your role and our LGBT network?
Thank you, Carmony. Yeah, I'm just thinking back, and right back before it started, and my experiences as a queer guy in the NHS, and about the homophobia and what I witnessed, and some health inequalities for patients. And I wanted to look back at being part of the LGBT neck, and there wasn't one really. And I thought I really wanted to be part of something like that. And I thought, oh, should I contact HR? But I thought, well, who do I contact? And it just went out of my mind. And then we fast forward a few months, and my friend told me about the network that he'd been asked to join, and he'd been elected as the chair. I would have come along to a meeting. So together with others at this meeting, I remember being upset and quite invigorated at the same time. I remember Carmony was you were delivering us some data from workforce data and from the stuff from Lancashire LGBT, and I was like, remember seeing like these experiences and thinking we need to do something about it, and we need to do. So quite fast we established that we needed awareness training for all our staff, and that was like a very key element of what needed to happen, as well as peer support element to the network. As well, when we were looking at our trust policies, they were very archaic and not inclusive at all for anyone sometimes. So that's where we kind of started and felt we needed to make a change. And it didn't happen overnight. And we decided as well, something what we wanted from like knowing our friends who had some health inequalities, partly because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity, was that we wanted patients to be part of our network as well as for staff across the Bay footprint. So each of our staff networks in UHMBT has an executive sponsor, and ours is the CEO, which is Aaron, and he's been so supportive over the last couple of years. Me as chair, I have regular one-to-ones with him. He attends our steering group meeting when he can. He even attends Pride events with his family. So if we fast forward to now, and I'm just trying to think like I've been elected as chair now, and we're looking at how we can move forward and do better. And part of that is what has Carmony touched on. The research, what we've done is a bit of a snapshot of what the community wants and what out of us. So we can feed back into the wider inclusive plan for the next few years, but also how we can develop our network and what our staff want and what our volunteers want from us. So we've kind of developed, right in the beginning, it was like a steering group, and we decided that we needed to keep a steering group as like instead of having the executive leadership, we have a steering group, and it consists of representatives from, so we have a trans and gender identity rep, a women's rep, and then also alongside we have a HR representative, who's somebody from HR represents them, and also somebody from patient experience and service inclusion, and also our assurance matron also joins us, along with me as chair, and our secretary. So we form that steering group, and we do a lot of this main decision making of the network on the more corporate side of things. And then we have our main group, which is for LGBT plus people only on allies, if we want to be part of it. And we that's more our peer support element. And then we also let people get involved if people want to like get involved in a specific stream of work, which might be for training, or it might be helping to organise things for a Pride event. I also sit part of the bullying and harassment joint working group, and I also sit on the inclusion steering group for the trust. This gives me a voice to be able to say and how we might view things, and help make real change within the trust. And also it lets other people ask me questions on what I think about things, and especially as in my main role, I'm a clinical support worker or a healthcare support worker, what you might have in your other trusts, and I have maybe a different experience to what somebody in a more corporate role might have in the trust, which helps merge things together a bit more. Me alongside the other people in the network, we help deliver our training package alongside other partners. with rainbow badge schemes, and we've been integral in developing our trans care policy, as well as a trans colleague policy as well with workforce. Most recently, we've been helping relook at our equality impact assessment policy, which has been very interesting, and also helping a lot of colleagues across the trust look at equality impact and what it actually means for an equality impact assessment, and how we can aid your policy for the better, for your service users or for the aim of who's going to be receiving that policy. So I think what's been something what we've got when it comes to recruitment, us as a trust, we decided that we have our LGBT leaflet, network leaflet, on job adverts. People can look at that, and I've said to Carmen in the past, it's been really nice, but prospective people who want to come and work for the trust have emailed us directly asking about what things we do, and things like that, and that's helped aid them in deciding whether or not they want to apply for the trust, which I think is amazing, is that people are thinking about the network and also are coming to work with us partly because we have an LGBT plus network. And it's also available, Vim leaflet, it's also available for staff and patients as well.
Thank you, Lee. What if you were just to pick one thing? What one thing are you really proud of?
I think, thinking back to me, for me, it's got to be on the personal. For me, let's see, it's been the peer support we give to our staff, especially during the pandemic. We've seen a 50% increase of mental health needs within our network, where people have needed to access mental health and supporting our colleagues to get that support. Something else what I'm very proud about is our LGBT plus allies and champions scheme, which, along with the development of the training, is being a real passion of mine, getting people on board with our agenda and getting the message out there.
Thank you. And I suppose one thing that I have really valued, Lee, around our approach of working together is the openness, honesty and real challenge that comes to me and trust leadership about what we're still not getting right. If there's one wish that you had for the next 12 months, what would it be?
Oh, that's a hard question. I think for me right now, which something, specifically if we're looking at the network itself and the leadership in the network, is the lack of dedicated time for the developing, working on network projects, or it's a lot of it's volunteering. When I look back at my own journey, when I first started being involved in the network, I had no allocated time at all with my role. And then we currently, in the trust, we decided that it would be an agreement between the line manager and the person involved in the network if they would be able to release any time. And once I started doing some more work and became the chair, my line manager agreed to give me, I think it was like 3 hours a month, which was more than what I was getting before. And then I moved forward to a different role where I have a line manager who's really supportive of the inclusion agenda, and they giving me a lot more. So that gives me the time to put work in, because I think a lot of staff networks have a lot of time to give when it comes to development or supporting people, meetings with HR or the inclusion groups, and I think it can be quite a lot of work, especially when we're looking at our service inclusion as well. So I think really for me, that's what you need more formalised. But thanks, Carmen, for that question. I'm sure that's something we can work on. I'm just more thinking, Jessica, why don't you tell us about, as a network member, in other trusts or in your work, how have networks made a decision? Made a difference to you personally?
Gosh, there are so many ways that networks have made a difference to me. So I'll do my best to summarise just a few of them. I think on a personal level, networks have provided me with the opportunity to meet other LGBTQ plus colleagues. I think particularly at the early stages of my career, it was really nice to be able to meet other people who were like me. At times it felt particularly, and then it just felt like when I came out, a lot of the focus was on that being a lesbian might hold me back in life in some way or in many ways. But there were so many ways that the people around me, I could learn from them and I could look up to them. And it really just made me realise that whilst in some ways, yes, arguably that is true, actually, the LGBTQ plus network was there to provide that support and to actually prove otherwise. I've certainly think I've also felt quite isolated at times. So we settled here in Lancaster after being here for university. Many of our friends, almost all of them, left the area. And the LGBTQ plus networks, not just in the NHS but elsewhere, have given me opportunities to join social events and make those connections and to build those support networks. Particularly as I don't have, I still live sort of quite a distance away from my family as well. I think you've touched on it already, but when I've been looking at job roles, potential employers, I think having a visible and active LGBTQ plus network has definitely makes a more attractive employer. So it has helped me to narrow down opportunities and to see whether or not somewhere a particular employer is somewhere where I'd really like to work. And another way that networks have made a difference to me is when I felt a little bit frustrated or I wanted to raise awareness of something or to help make a difference. Networks have really provided a mechanism for enacting that change, to give me a vehicle to kind of to raise that awareness and to really make that difference, not just to LGBTQ plus colleagues, but patients, being able to suggest solutions. So it's been really good to put all of that energy into something, and the network has been the mechanism to do that.
Oh, brilliant, thanks. It's great to hear about what it's like for a network member, maybe from who's outside our trust, to how it really affects them. But tell me more about your role with Lancashire and South Cumbria ICS, and how do networks play a part in what you do for the inclusion agenda?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am extremely fortunate that I'm also able to, as part of my role, work on the inclusion agenda. So at the moment, I'm working on the vaccination programme, but my actual job is working on the leadership, talent and OD agenda. And inclusive leadership is absolutely a key priority within that portfolio. So as a system, when we're redesigning services, developing work streams, LGBTQ plus and other inclusion networks are integral to that, to ensure that we're hearing about what matters to these communities and how we can ensure that their views are heard. We also have a network of inclusion leads across the system, and they are instrumental in ensuring that our priorities for the inclusion agenda are aligned with those of our organisations, identifying areas where we can undertake work together on particular campaigns, sharing best practice and supporting each other. And as part of my work with that network, Carmony very kindly invited me to help facilitate with the Inclusive and Compassionate Leadership Programme with Eden Charles that she's already spoken about. And I was absolutely delighted to be involved with that. And one of those priorities that we're currently working on is designing a bespoke development programme for inclusion network leads across the system. That will be done collaboratively with those individuals and inclusion leads across all organisations to design that programme to support inclusion network leads to really make that change and to equip them with a toolkit to be able to take on that role in a really effective way. So that's kind of how my role fits in at a system level with inclusion networks and also other kinds of networks within the inclusion agenda.
Thanks, Jessica and to Lee. We've got an external web page that you can access our inclusion strategy and annual reports and kind of monthly inclusion newsletter. And if you want to get in contact with us, I think I think Ivo's going to pop up a slide. If you want to get in contact with any of us, then please do. We're very happy to share, and we're also very keen to learn from others. And so thank you.
Anthony, you're on mute, sorry.
Sorry about that. I was speaking on mute very helpfully. Thank you very much to Jess, Carmony and Lee for that. Couple of questions in the chat. First to Carmony, and then if Lee and Jess could chip in. Question is about inclusion leads. So we've mentioned them a couple of times. Are these roles that are voluntary, or is there protected time around that role? Or is there any plan to make it protected time? What are your thoughts on that, Carmony?
I have some very strong thoughts on that, and Lee kind of has described where we're at. So we have been very clear as an organisation that time is needed, but we have agreed that on an individual basis, really, with line managers. We are very clear that in the development of our next 5-year towards inclusion strategy and approach, and the resource that goes with that, and that's the point that we're at now, and the work that we're doing, that we've got real clarity around those network roles, and I suppose a lot of this has been learning for us. So you know, we're 5 years into having a number of networks now, and some of those, that flexibility has worked really well, but actually, as Lee described, it can very much depend on local line managers, in terms of kind of not just understanding, but like pressures of work and the particular departments and the ability to release people, and a lot of people in our organisation are so passionate about this agenda, and I think the important thing for all organisations is to understand how to recognise that, how to nurture people and enable them to be involved, and recognise that as something that is really core business to us all, and the organisational benefits that releasing people for that can have.
Thanks, Carmony. That's really helpful. From your perspective, Lee, then, do you think that so what Carmony describes is a kind of case-by-case approach? What's your view on that kind of model?
I think for me, I really struggle to start off with doing like 40-hour-a-week workload with my main job, and then maybe spending another 10 hours a week doing network work, and trying to balance that time was really hard, and that work-life balance because of that. So I'm really excited for us looking into our next 5-year strategy, how we're going to develop how that's going to happen. Hopefully learning from other trusts who already do it, and how they went about it is going to be good for us.
So the other question we have in the box, and it's coming up on a number of these webinars, is from Jess and Lee's perspective, what does a good LGBTQ plus ally look like? Jess, do you want that one?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I think for me personally, I think you can be an ally for other members of your community, for example. So I think as a lesbian, I can be an ally for our trans colleagues and patients, for example. And some of the things that I've learned in doing that and trying to be the best ally that I can be for them is by sort of helping to raise awareness, by educating myself, by learning, by listening, predominantly listening to those individuals, and really listening and trying to understand what they need. And I think it's really, I think, for what I would want in a good ally for me, as a lesbian. I think it's for me, I would want somebody who isn't dismissive, or who isn't who doesn't think that one size fits all. Somebody who really genuinely wants to learn about our experiences, and who wants to really get involved, and whether that's in really small ways like sharing things on social media, or whether that's coming along to social events, or even just taking part in Pride, because if you've never been to a Pride event, they are absolutely fantastic. So please do, if you can get involved when we're allowed to, outside the pandemic. But I think those are a few things that I think I would like to see in myself as an ally for other members of my community, but also that's what I would look for in allies from my own community as well.
How about you, Lee? What's your sense of that?
I think, again, for me as a gay man, I find when people say, well, yeah, I support LGBT people, or I support, you need to really understand what it means. So if you really want to be aware of it, and aware of us, the challenges, what we face on a day-to-day basis, and emphasise with that, that's somebody not somebody who maybe, as we've had in the past with our initial launch of our allyship program, was we introduced these lanyards, these rainbow lanyards, and everybody wanted a rainbow lanyard, so they decided they wanted to be an LGBT champion, and they maybe necessarily weren't actually on board with our agenda. They just wanted a nice NHS lanyard, which is why we quickly introduced to get the lanyards and to be a champion, you have to attend some sort of training or agree to attend a training.
Anthony, on mute.
A few more questions in chat, then I will get the hang of this eventually. So going back to the networks, there's a question in chat about whether the network's in work time, or whether it's outside of work time, or whether it bridges both.
So yeah, so so for me, we arrange our them both within 9 to 5 hours, but later on. So we normally have our meetings about 4 o'clock. The reason for that is if people who work shifts, that's normally a quiet time, potentially on a ward environment. But then also, if you look at people who also maybe getting to start a night shift, potentially some people want to join before they start getting up. So it's not a perfect time. But I don't think it's a perfect time for a network in the NHS when there's people work 9 to 5, there's people work shifts. Some people do it in their work time, if they're 9 to 5ers. Some people, if they work shifts, tend to do it in their own time.
Great, thank you. And a few more questions, lots of questions now coming up. How easy, so question to all of you probably, Carmony, from your kind of more strategic view, and then the others from really how they see changes, I guess, but how easy is it to get the views of LGBT plus staff from the network through to the boardroom? And do you have any tips on how to navigate that process?
So I'd say that fairly easy to get those views directly in the structure that we have. So Lee, our chief executive, is the sponsor of our LGBT plus network, so attends those network meetings when he can, and has one-to-ones with Lee. I also meet with him and David Wilkinson, who's our exec director of people and OD and our exec lead for inclusion, on a very regular basis. So that kind of feedback, both corporately from an inclusion perspective and directly from the network members, is there. And actually you see some of those kind of concerns raising up, but also coming down in terms of what can we do about this. So actually, if there are particular issues that have been raised to the board, Aaron might reach out directly to Lee to say we've had this particular issue, and it might be about people accessing our services, or a concern that's been raised, or some feedback about colleagues. And from your perspective, what could we do here? What are we missing? Does that make sense? I don't know if Lee, you want to kind of talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah. So when we're looking at that, so following on, so again, it's that direct access what we have, and also sitting on them groups, what I mentioned before, the inclusion group. Those are led by normally an executive director. So you're getting them information once a year. Me and Carmony deliver our annual report to the board, which highlights what we've done in the last 12 months, what we plan to do in the next 12 months, and reasons why we're doing it. When I get my email off Aaron directly, and I think oh, what's happened? But it's great to me to be able to look at it, discuss it with my colleagues, and be like in the network, and be like, oh well, I might be able to say to him, yeah, you know, we're already working on some of this stuff. It's going to take time. Or it might say obviously something what we need to fix now, and some things are quick fixes, and some things are longer fixes. I hope that answers your questions.
That's great, thanks, Lee. A couple of other questions bubbling up in the chat then. So have you found example stories of lived experience helped? Have people come forward, and have others understood? Who wants to take that? Maybe Jess, perhaps? Or Lee, it doesn't matter.
No, I'll take it and then pass over to Lee. But just, I think the very short answer to that is yes, they are absolutely crucial. Actually hearing people's lived experiences, they're not only more powerful when trying to enact change, but they are the only way that you're going to find out really what matters to people and what differences we need to make to improve, whether that's somebody's sort of life as a whole or their working life. I think there is absolutely the importance that we put on lived experience is absolutely, we should put as much energy into that as possible, and that's where the listening comes in. It's really important to listen to these lived experiences and to find ways. You have to seek them out as well. You can't just rely on people coming to you to share their lived experience. You have to create ways in which they can share that with you. So you have to create a welcoming environment, a safe environment for somebody to share that experience with you. And I think there should be more onus on organisations to create those kinds of places for people to do that, rather than relying on somebody to come forward. Because if they come forward with that experience, 9 times out of 10, it's probably a bit too late, and you could have done with understanding about their experiences a little bit beforehand. I don't know whether Lee has anything else that he'd like to add on that.
No, I definitely agree, because the answer is yes. And so I take back, if I go back 5 years ago, when we first started a network, in our group, in our network, we were discussing our experiences in front of Carmony, and I think Carmony started to understand a bit more about what challenges we were going through. So to start off with, that was our lived experiences, what then were fed straight back. But then I moved forward to, we started doing in our week, we have a weekly news. So in LGBT Plus History Month, we normally have a lived experience as a story from a staff member each year. This year we're doing it slightly different, where we're actually taking over the whole newsletter for a special edition for LGBT Plus History Month with quite a few on. I think it's hard to sometimes to get maybe some people on board, if not everybody's on board with the agenda, to understand those difficulties. You can say in a training session the statistics of what's going on, but until you hear a story, what's actually affecting a colleague of yours, which is why in our feedback to the board this year, we had 2 lived experiences from members of staff, one positive and one what wasn't positive, and I think that really helped capture where we are as a trust at the moment, and how far we've got to go.
Thank you, Lee. A couple of questions in chat that I want to give to you together. So the first is, how do you communicate with staff in clinical roles to engage them and invite them to LGBTQ meetings? But the second question, which is kind of aligned to it, is how do you navigate creating and balancing safe space for members, particularly while we're working remotely, and space where allies are also invited? So how do we kind of get that balance between what's a safe space, LGBTQ space only, and also that's available for allies?
So, so when it comes to communicating with staff, which I think anytime communicating with staff, not just at the moment, is really hard. You have to remember that, you know, people don't use emails every day, or they don't maybe check their emails once a month if they're going to become member of staff. And by that time, they've probably forgot the login for the computer. But you'll find, so this is why we've got the actual leaflets. What we encourage, or what the comms team encourage for our weekly news for staff, is it gets printed out in some areas and it gets put up in the staff notice areas, so they're talking. If we have a specific project going on, what we want people to be involved in, we might put some like leaflets about, or in the staff area, rest areas, so then they're available for people to go. You got to think as well, like places like occupational health, where a lot of staff are going to be going through and sitting in a waiting room, having stuff there for people where they're going to access. So that's one way to contact. And if we move on to the next question, what was about the safe space?
About creating space that's
Yeah.
both safe for
So
peers,
especially,
but also allies.
yeah, it's at the moment. So what we have for our allies group, so we have a Teams group just for allies. It's for the badge game and anybody who's for the Rainbow Badge game, and we have over 100 people on that, and we share things on there. And then some people, and then we have our steering group, which is obviously we've got allies on it in here, from like the representative from Work Cross, and that's a separate team. And then we actually have a discrete team, which is totally different. It's not a channel or a hidden channel or anything. It's a which has nothing to do with LGBT stuff in the name. It's totally discrete. It's under a different section, and that's one way how we do communicate. Also, we have a Twitter account, which, yes, Twitter's very thing, but people can just look on there. They don't have to follow us. They can just look and see what we're doing and tap in and out. So, and that's how we've been doing it. Normally, when it comes to face-to-face meetings, we have a discrete meeting room. What isn't necessarily so originally it didn't used to be on our main site. It was one of our peripheral sites but it was still easy to get to. So and it was very discreet, and it was in an area where you didn't have to. You could be in the area for a number of reasons. Unfortunately, we lost that meeting room, so then we moved to a different meeting room, which again, it's quite tucked away in the hospital on one of the main sites. I think our biggest challenge for meeting is because we're over such a wide area, we really struggle to get physical meetings with people, which I suppose one good thing about Teams and what has happened through the pandemic is that people are easily can access and join us for things if they want to. Yeah.
That's great, thanks, Lee. Any comments from Carmony or Jess on those two questions? So the first was about reaching out to clinical colleagues, and the second is about that safe space issue about LGBTQ plus people, but also allies.
I think the reaching out, I mean, Lee's articulated very well, but I think the thing that I think Lee doesn't quite realise the power of some of the work that he and the network members do is that informal networking and connections that aren't any of those kind of corporate machine of communications, if that makes sense. And And actually one of the things that the LGBT network is absolutely fantastic with is linking in with our other networks, so our disability network and actually our Black and Asian and minority ethnic network in particular. And those connections, some of which we do have some formal structures for that in terms of network connections, but a lot of that is network members coming together and sharing and recognising intersectionality. And it's been a really big focus, hasn't it, for you, Lee, and the team in this in the last 12 months. So those connections and informal connections with groups, with individuals to individuals, really are where some of our messages get passed along, as well as the stuff that we are doing corporately and trying to use every method of communication to raise awareness as we possibly can. And one of the other things is, absolute visibility, sharing of staff experience stories and what we are doing and what our data is telling us, to try and reach out to people in different ways that different people will hear about what we're doing and what our current challenges are. And that is regularly seen throughout all of our trust communications, not just those that are inclusion focused, but from an inclusion perspective specifically, we have a monthly inclusion newsletter where the networks share developments, information, learning for people, and that goes out to everybody across the organisation to be able to access. So yeah, multiple methods, but actually the power of individual contact and sharing and networking it is really important.
Great, thanks, Carmony. Final question. Oh, I'm sorry, Jessica, go ahead.
Just to add, and without wanting to kind of, because I very much see this as a celebration of all the fantastic work that's happening, but I just wanted to kind of make the point that the fact that we are talking about keeping meetings discreet and talking about the fact that colleagues don't feel able to be out at work and be their whole authentic selves, the fact that we're talking about doing things in a way that isn't going to kind of bring attention to the fact that they are from the LGBTQ plus community is a really important one, just to make sure that we stress that a lot of the feedback that I have had in the past, and even so now, when we're trying to undertake some of these activities, and this is not specific to Morecambe Bay, I'll just kind of make that point, is that this stuff isn't needed anymore. Why are you doing this? It isn't needed. And I think the fact that we're being asked these questions and that we're having to consider these things when we're undertaking these bits of work is because there is so much more that needs to be done with this agenda, and we still have so much more to achieve. So I think the fact that we are discussing things like that really just illustrates that point. The fact that we have to think about these things when we are doing this really goes to show that all those people that are feeding back saying, well, why do you need Pride, or why do you need money to do this, or why is that necessary? There you go. That's why. And I just, without wanting to sort of dampen the celebration aspect of these webinars, I really just wanted to make sure that we've made that point.
And
that's the point well made. Final question then in the chat. So I'm going to ask you all separately individually to answer this, but in this space, so thinking about LGBT staff networks and the broader impact in general, what's been the greatest challenge and the greatest opportunity in that space?
Oh, welcome to me. So I was hoping to listen to some other people first. So I think we were on about the challenges. So
challenge and opportunity. So I think that there are both, but this won't have been an easy ride. So we're not pretending this stuff is easy, but we know how valuable it is. Just from your experience, so the biggest challenge, but also the biggest opportunity.
So I think the biggest challenge for me has been one, getting our people together when we would normally do face-to-face meetings and having them, and we had to get people together, especially over a large footprint. And then to the side of that, we have right at the beginning, you have a lot of active people, and then people fizzle out and trying to get new people in. And then you have a bit of a lull, and maybe it's a core group of 3 or 4 people what are keeping things ticking over. And and then you get an influx of new people. You find, especially within the NHS, you know, your doctors who were in training, they do 12 months on placement and then they're leaving. Sometimes they join you, and then sometimes they'll get involved in something, so they just want to be that peer support, and then they're gone. So you have that quick turnaround, and as well. I do just want to quickly mention that I think one of the challenges what some of our network members have actually had is, which isn't, I just want to mention some of our network members who got who are HIV positive or HIV undetectable, because what has happened during COVID is when we've introduced our COVID risk assessments for every member of staff, the staff who wouldn't normally have disclosed their status have had to disclose their status as part of that risk assessment. Some normally would have, especially the clinical ones would have, but the ones who aren't clinical, and that is now, and that they've had to disclose their status to their managers, what they wouldn't normally would have done, and that's been a bit of a challenge and a learning curve for, I think, some of us, and supporting people through that. And I think what I'm really proud of is one, we've managed to reach number one, which has been a long time coming, but also for me it's been the training, what we deliver. You know, hundreds of people have been in our training course now, which 5 years ago hadn't, and we've still got hundreds and thousands to go. So it's exciting, but that's the biggest achievement, I think, for me. Carmen, you'll probably say, Lee, you've done X, Y, and Z, and you've done this, but I always I'm bad on the spot, and I tend to ramble. But that's me. Thank you. Yeah, I'm mute, Carmen.
So from one rambler to the next, then, Lee. I think in terms of biggest challenge, like we still have some really, really tricky issues and views in our organisation and communities, and you know, sometimes it can be really disheartening working in this world, because you think you're doing really well and you can see the progress that you've made, and then you hear a story. And I can think of something that's come into me anonymously in the last couple of months, a real reflection of some of our rurality, and some of our areas are not diverse at all, from a whole host of characteristics, and the challenges that brings to some of our colleagues working in those areas, and the responses that they get, and difficulties. And I think almost we've done the stuff that has been doable in these recent years. Does that make sense? And the people that were almost on board are on board and are getting it. And actually we've got almost the hardest things now to really address. But I think in terms of opportunities, like, people are listening. Like, this is happening. You know, we're having conversations. We've got people from different communities involved. We've got people in our BAME network championing LGBT inclusion. You know, those connections are being made across our organisation, across our leadership teams. And I just, you know, COVID, from a pandemic perspective, has shone a light on inequalities. But what that light shining does is helps people who weren't already sitting up and taking action to really take a look and think about what they can do to make a difference.
Thanks, Carmony. Jess, did you want to just finish that off?
Yeah, I just think, given that I'm based within an integrated care system at that system level, I think it's a really good opportunity for me to address sort of, I think we have an opportunity now, as we move towards an integrated care system way of working on a more national basis, and these arrangements are formalised in some way. I think it's a really key opportunity to really drive forward the inclusion agenda, not just for LGBTQ+, but all types of inclusion. And by having dedicated resource to do this at system level, to kind of bring together the fantastic work that's already going on, not just across NHS organisations, but across local authority, third sector. But in order to do that, we also need funding to be able to do that, to have dedicated funding pots to drive forward the inclusion agenda. And if you've got the energy and the resource of humans to drive forward the agenda with the funding that goes to go along with it, we can do absolutely magical things, not just for the LGBTQ plus community, but for everybody over the course of the next few years. So I think that's a real opportunity that we have, that we need to be sending out those messages to the people, the decision makers, to really sort of drive forward the importance of having the inclusion agenda, not just within organisations, but also at system level as well.
Jess, what a really nice way to end the webinar. That's a really, really lovely statement. Thank you for that. And I think really is powerful. Can I just thank you guys for sharing your experiences and being honest with us here today. It's really helpful that we have this honest learning space. Can I ask people to complete their surveys, evaluation surveys that were in chat? It really helps us plan future sessions. And I hope everybody stays well, stays safe and has a great weekend. Thank you, everybody.